This is your tutorial for the Change in Continuity Over Time essay for AP World History. So here are the elements for the Change in Continuity Over Time essay, or if we do a project. First off, you need a thesis, and the thesis is going to need to address both change and continuity. I'll explain what I mean by that later on this tutorial. You need to have evidence within inside of the essay and or project, and the minimum requirement is 5 pieces of concrete support for the arguments. You want to make sure that these 5 pieces of concrete support are well described and connected back to whatever thesis that you are using. Now, notice here I said this is a minimum. Remember, we're always going for the expanded core, so we want to set this up in such a way where you can hit that minimum, but then go a little bit farther as well. After that, you're going to provide analysis. Analysis is the reason or reasons about why the change or continuity takes place. And then last up, and I know this one's going to be abstract and it's going to be a little bit strange at first, it's called global analysis. The idea of global analysis is where you explain how an outside region affected the change or continuity of the region that you were talking about inside of the essay. I know that sounds kind of strange, and I'll explain a little bit more about it when I get further into the tutorial, but do notice that global analysis is about an outside region and how that affects the change or continuity within the region that you're talking about in your essay. So it has to be in that direction, from the outside towards the group that you're talking about. The thesis. So just like in the other types of essays that we've talked about, your first thing you want to do is a thesis, which is 2 to 3 sentences, and we're going to treat that as the introductory paragraph. So as usual, don't write a full-blown paragraph. I know you want to, because that's the way your English classes operate, but this is not what you want to do for the audience you're going to be writing for. Again, it's all about audience. It's all about who you are writing to, and your audience is the AP grader. The AP grader, the first thing they're looking for is a thesis, so let's give them that thesis as quickly as possible. Now make sure you treat the thesis as an introductory paragraph, so indent it, 2 to 3 sentences, and then separate it from your body paragraphs. But you always want to make sure that your thesis is the first thing they see. First sentence should be about an overall change. Next sentence about an overall continuity. And then finish up with a sentence that talks about significance, tying this all back to the prompt or to the question. What's really important I want you to see here is this. A thesis is like an umbrella. It's giving the overall change, the overall continuity. Then when we get into the body paragraphs, you kind of provide those like subsets or subcategories where you're going to talk about little bits and pieces of the thesis for each one of the body paragraphs. Make sure all of your arguments have a reason or a because statement. We never want to just make a statement. We want to make sure that there's a reason behind it, so it gives it some significance to it. So here are some examples. First off, a poor example of a change in continuity over time thesis. Rome changed for any political, social, and economic reasons. Throughout the period, the Roman Empire established roads and highways. Okay, so why is this a poor example? First off, I want you to notice that the very first sentence is really vague, and it refers to changes. It doesn't state what the change is. Rome changed for many political, social, and economic reasons. Political, social, and economic can fit for anything. Those need to be modified. It's fine if you want to use those terms, but you need to provide more modification for those. Otherwise, you're just referring to changes. You're not really telling us what the changes are going to be. Also, look at this second sentence. Throughout the period, the Roman Empire established roads and highways. That is true. The Roman Empire did do that, but it's not a very significant statement, especially for the question we're going to be looking into about the change from republic into empire. So while it's true that this is a continuity, the continuity significance is just not all that important. So what do we learn out of this? It's really important that you provide a specific change, a specific continuity, a statement of significance, and all of this relates back to the question. So here's a good example. Rome changed from a republic to an empire due to the internal need for land and the external drive for expansion. Throughout the period, Rome sought out new resources to calm internal class conflicts. This demonstrates how internal conflicts over land change the composition of leadership. Notice what we've done with this thesis. The first sentence is a very specific political and military change that takes place. We understand the reason for it because it's specific. The second sentence is a continuity throughout the time period. In fact, we even start off that way as a transition. Notice carefully again, it's related directly back on the movement from republic to empire. So this very much connects back to the question. And then last up, we have a significance that talks about why all this is important, why the prompt itself is important. Address change in continuity. Now this is really important. I want you to understand this. With AP World History, you cannot do what's called double dipping. That means if you get 1 point for the change in continuity of the thesis, that's awesome, but that doesn't mean it counts for the rest of the paragraphs. What you have to do is get the point for the thesis and then provide change in continuity in the body paragraphs as well in order to get the full amount of points. So in order to do this, we're going to do the following. We're going to have a thesis, and then after that, you're going to have at least 4 body paragraphs. So that means 2 change paragraphs, 2 continuity paragraphs. Changes in continuities are arguments. So that means that in every topic sentence, you've got to make sure you have a because statement. You've got to have a reason for the change, a reason for the continuity. Examples of change in continuity statements. So here's a poor example of a change statement. Rome had multiple triumvirates that competed for power. Okay, the reason why this is not a good change statement is it doesn't relate back to the question. The question is about the change from republic to empire. This is true that there were multiple triumvirates that competed for power, but there's nothing here that's significant back to our thesis, back to the question. Here's a poor example of a continuity statement. Throughout the period, Rome used gladiator games to pacify their citizens. Again, great statement. Here's the problem with it. It doesn't relate back to the question. It doesn't talk about how we move from a republic into an empire. So, how about some good examples? Rome's triumvirates transferred power to generals who centralized control. Okay, now we have a really specific change statement. We have a statement that goes from the transfer of power, which is implied here from the Senate, to the generals. That's a change statement that's talking about empire control. Notice, too, that there is a reason in there. The warrant is in there, it's just implied. The implied warrant is that we have a change because of the centralization of power. Okay, here's the continuity. Throughout the period, Rome centralized leadership over the populace by stressing a common national identity. Okay, very specific, very much answering the question of movement from republic to empire. And again, the warrant is implied. The warrant is we see centralization of leadership because of the common national identity. Evidence. Each paragraph must have supporting concrete evidence. That means specific historical examples, specific historical reasons. Okay, so we want to make sure we provide those historical examples and describe them well, providing a significant statement. The essay must have a minimum of 5 pieces of evidence, but that's not what we're going to do because we want expanded core. So that means in every single paragraph, we're going to follow the rule of 3. I want to see 3 pieces of evidence. In every body paragraph, you're probably saying, yeah, but Zucker, that means we're going to go well beyond the 5 pieces of evidence. You're right. We are going to do that because we want to get expanded core. The more pieces of evidence we have, the more in-depth and complex our essay is, the more likely we're going to hit that 8 or 9 score. Okay, analysis. Remember, analysis is always tough, and I know a lot of people struggle with this, but here's the idea behind analysis. You got to provide a reason why the change took place, why the continuity took place. This is not a description of the change or continuity. That's what you do inside of the body paragraph. At the very end of the body paragraph, you are providing an explanation of why the change or continuity took place. I want you to place this as the last sentence of each body paragraph. Now again, as usual, this is a guideline. If you are a good writer and you feel like you can put that analysis throughout the body paragraph, go right ahead and do that. Okay, there's nothing against doing that kind of thing. But the reason why I like placing the analysis as the last sentence of the body paragraph is that it gives you a chance to describe everything you want to describe about the change or continuity and then wrap it up with an analysis at the end, and that helps you to transition into your next body paragraph. Some examples of analysis statements. So here's a poor example of analysis statement. Rome's change to an empire was due to many positive and negative factors. Okay, this is still an issue that a lot of people are having, so I really want to address this. Using the term positive, negative tells me nothing. You have to modify those. Saying positive and negative could refer to anything that's positive, anything that's negative. I really don't know what you're talking about there. Now, I know that you know what you're talking about, but remember, when you're writing, you've got to let me know what specifically you are talking about. So you got to make sure that you provide a very specific reason. Don't give me vague words. If you want to use a word like positive or negative, that's fine, but you've got to make sure that you modify those words with something specific. So here's a good example of what I'd be looking for. Roman generals gained power because the Senate gave them the ability to expand Roman control over foreign regions. Notice carefully there we have a very specific reason for the change. The change took place because Roman generals needed the power to go out and fight, but that means the Senate gave up their power, and now you have a centralization of power under an emperor. Okay, we have a very specific reason being given there. That's a really good example. That's what I'm looking for at the end of these paragraphs. Global analysis. Okay, this is the tough one. This is going to be in your concluding paragraph. Okay, AP World doesn't really have concluding paragraphs, but what I've done is that I've had you put some of these big skills into a concluding paragraph so that we can make sure that we hit the reader with what the reader really wants to see. So here's how that works. You're going to explain how a region outside of the one you discussed has affected your region. So if the question's about China, you could talk about the Middle East affecting China. If the question is about Mesoamerica, you could talk about how Europe affected Mesoamerica. If the question in this case is about Rome, you could talk about how India affected Rome, how Europe affected Rome, how the Middle East affected Rome. Notice, though, a few things here that's really important. It's a region outside of the region you're talking about, and it must be in the direction of that region affecting the region you're talking about. So you can't talk about how Rome affected someplace outside of Rome. That doesn't count. You've got to talk about how someplace outside of Rome affected Rome internally, okay? Explain and analyze the relationship and effect on your region's changes or continuities. I'll explain here with some examples. So a poor example, Rome's expansion united Western Europe under Pax Romana. Okay, this actually looks like a pretty good global analysis. If you think about it, Rome is expanding outside of itself into Western Europe, so it's not within the area, right? And it's talking about Pax Romana, that's about an empire. Okay, so there you go. It sounds like this would be really good. Here's why this is not a good global analysis. We're moving from Rome to the effect on Western Europe. That's not global analysis. Global analysis is just the opposite. How would Western Europe have affected Rome? So here's a good example. European tribal groups created fears in Rome that led to an expansion of Roman control over the so-called barbaric peoples of the north. Okay, notice how this is global analysis. It's the European tribal groups, okay, outside of Rome. They had the effect internally to Rome. That led to more Roman control. That led to more empire. Okay, so notice how global analysis is moving from the outside having effects on the region you're talking about. So I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm sure that you're kind of wondering, okay, how does all this look when we're done with this essay or project? So I would suggest that you look at it in 3 parts. First up is your thesis. Okay, thesis is your introductory body paragraph, 2 to 3 sentences, 1 sentence change, 1 continuity, 1 significance. Okay, then you're going to provide 2 change body paragraphs, 2 continuity body paragraphs. What order do they have to be in? Up to you. You could have 2 changes, 2 continuities. You could have change continuity, change continuity. You could have continuity, change, continuity, change. That's up to you how you want to do that. There is no rule about that. The rule, though, is you got to make sure you have 2 changes and 2 continuities and that they are well organized with clear transitions. Inside of the body paragraph, you're going to have a topic sentence on change or a topic sentence on continuity. You're then going to do rule of 3 for the evidence, and then you're going to wrap it up with an analysis, the reason for the particular change or continuity. Then I would suggest end the essay with a concluding paragraph about global analysis. Talk about how a region outside of the region you're talking about had an impact on that region. So these are all the elements that go into the change and continuity over time essay or project. Okay, you've got to make sure all that is there. How do you get into then the expanded core? You do all of this plus more, so you always try to do more than the minimum, okay? And on top of that, you want to make sure that it's well organized. By the way, if you're following my essay format here, you're doing more than the minimum. For example, if you provide 2 changes and 2 continuities, we are hitting the rule of what they want minimum, and we're actually going over it. Okay, just by providing 2 changes and 2 continuities, you will be going over what they are requiring from you. If you do a rule of 3 in every body paragraph, again, you are going over what they are requiring of you. Okay, because remember, you only need 5 pieces of evidence. If you're doing analysis at the end of every body paragraph, you're actually going over what they would be expecting of you, okay, by doing this. So I'm actually providing you, if you follow this model, you're actually going to be going over the minimum in at least 3 different areas. Now on top of that, if you provide a really well-organized essay, you have an excellent chance to hit those core points and get into the expanded core really quickly. Okay, so we'll be working on this in class. Hope this helped out. Hope it gave you a clear sense of what we're looking for. And we will strengthen your skills as far as change and continuity over time goes. Thanks, and see you in class.